There are very few names less synonymous with gaming than Nintendo, but do they actually make good games? Well, I have a theory. When I was younger, say around the age 5 or 6, I never really played video games. It had nothing to do with there not being any in the house. I was just scared to. I always watched my brothers play, and I could never quite get it around my young head how people could look at this screen while still being able to control the controller with their hands. Eventually, however, I started taking baby steps with the PS2 me and my brothers were bought for Christmas, and sure enough, I was hooked for life. I loved it. I mainly played single player, because at the time I didn't really have many friends, and my brothers would play these games I didn't really care for. No, I will not play FIFA with you. By my 7th birthday, I wanted my own console, and that was of course the GameCube. Since owning this beautiful, dinky purple box, I've been a Nintendo fanboy. Yet recently I've been thinking about Nintendo games. Well, if you can even call them that. Let's think about this. What exactly is a game? Well, the first definition of a game, thanks to a quick Google search, tells us a form of competitive activity or sport played according to rules. Now with this definition, what kind of games come to mind? Well, sports, chess, board games as a whole, classic video games like Pong, and even newer ones like the multiplayer aspect of Call of Duty, which to a lot of people is the sole reason that game exists. As a single player gamer, I can never quite fathom how so many people could buy these games without touching the single player aspect of them. To me, the single player is the main chunk, with the multiplayer just being an extra. It would be like me buying The Legend of Zelda just to play about in the options menu. Is this idea of the single player being the main part of the game with the multiplayer being an extra changing? Or are games just coming full circle? Pong. Pong is generally considered the first proper video game. Well, the first commercially successful one anyway. So we're going to use it as a starting point. Now what I find so interesting about this grandfather of games is that the original was a multiplayer game. And only a multiplayer game. At first, I always found it weird how the oldest games ever created was multiplayer and not single player. In my head it seemed easier to make a single player game than a multiplayer game. Thinking about it though, it's probably easier to make a game that integrates two people as opposed to making an AI. At the time, games were still synonymous with things like sports and board games, which usually featured multiple players, so it only made sense to make video games first and multiplayer games to ease people into them. Eventually, the single player gaming scene started to emerge. Space Invaders, Pac-Man, and of course, Nintendo games. Now, when I talk about Nintendo games being bad video games in this video, I'm referring to the more single player experience ones. Super Mario, The Legend of Zelda, Metroid, you know the ones. Now don't get me wrong, all of these games are great and many of them I consider personal favourites, but by definition, are they really games? Think about Zelda. There's no real competitive aspect against another person. You're not really aiming for a best score. To me, single player games aren't really games as they're defined. But there has been a new definition added to the word games. Remember I said that was the first definition? Well, here's the second. An activity that one engages in for amusement. And this definition very much fits the current ideology of games, especially single player games. That definition aside, do Nintendo even make good games? Well, are they even games at all? Surely. Single player narrative driven games like Mario and Zelda are more interactive stories than games. Basic plots at first. In Super Mario, you have to save the princess. In The Legend of Zelda, you also have to save the princess. But as technology has come along, games like The Last of Us and the Walking Dead game has taken storytelling in video games to the next level. No pun intended. Even Nintendo have dabbled with more advanced storytelling in games. Think about Rosalina's storybook in Super Mario Galaxy and The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, which is quite unlike anything else in video games. Then you have Animal Crossing, a life simulator, which is just as much single player as it is multiplayer. This game has no narrative or no competitive aspects, but is still strangely addictive. Is Animal Crossing trying to tell us that life is just one big, narrativeless multiplayer game? I think we may be going a tad too deep there. Remember when I said, is the idea of the single player being the main chunk of the game with the multiplayer being an extra changing? Or just going full circle? Yeah, let's go back to that. As more and more games come out, and the advent of online multiplayer, many games are relying on their multiplayer being the main chunk of their game. Some even foregoing the single player experience altogether. Even games that focus on a fantastic single player experience come with a multiplayer aspect. Even Nintendo are caving with their new game Splatoon. It was announced as an online multiplayer game, but was only later dropped out of a single player mode too. To begin with, these multiplayer online only games annoyed me. They seemed lazy and made with little next to no effort. But then I remembered that by one definition, these kinds of games are more game than the classics Nintendo make. They involve people competing against each other for the best score, or to win, which fundamentally is what gaming is all about. These single player games that Nintendo and the likes have created, about traversing whole new worlds and getting lost in stories, well, they're really their whole new thing, but we have decided to call them games and then add a new definition to that word. Well, that's what I think anyway. That's all from me, but what about you guys? Do you think it's lazy to make only multiplayer games? Do you prefer single player or multiplayer games? Do you even like Nintendo games at all? Leave your answers to the question or just about anything else you have to say about this video down below. This channel is just as much yours as it is mine. If you enjoyed this video, then please leave it a like or share it. It would really help me out. And if you want to see more of me, my theories and my face for some reason, then subscribe to the channel. That's all for now, internauts. But always remember to stay open. Thank you.